I call the meeting of the Urbana Historic Preservation Commission to order. Could we have roll call, please?
Mr. Hayes,
Present.
Mr. Metcalf, Ms. Novak,
Here.
Ms. Pagliuzzo,
Here.
Mr. Seiler, Mr. Shepard,
Here.
and Ms. Smith.
Here. We have a quorum. I would like to welcome David Hayes to the commission. David teaches in landscape architecture at the university, and we're happy to have you.
Thank you very much. Glad to be here.
And Scott Dossett is not here, but I would like to thank him for his service, and he got a street sign out of the deal, so, and snacks from Schnuck, so
Yep.
it all works. We have no changes to the agenda. So the next item are the approval of the minutes of previous meetings, including a regular meeting of May 2nd and special meeting of May 2nd. Are there any corrections or comments? Really? Did you read them?
I move approval of the minutes.
And I'll second.
A motion by Kim, second by Gina. All those in favor? Aye. Minutes are approved as written unanimously. Amazing.
I could have nitpicked on a missing word or something, but it wasn't.
Thank you. We have no written communications. Audience participation, I didn't remember we had audience up in the front. Is there anyone from the audience that would like to participate in something besides the public hearing, which will come up next? Okay. We have no continued public hearings or no old business, so the next item on the agenda is new public hearing. I open HP 2018 COA 06, a request by XJ1 for a certificate of appropriateness at 209 South Broadway Avenue to remove deteriorated wood trim permanently. First up, we'll have a staff report from Kevin.
I'm quick. Okay. Okay, so this is a request for a certificate of appropriateness for the Landmark Hotel. Back in April, our Building Safety Division noticed quite a few rotted, deteriorated, loose pieces of wood trim, especially many of the, what I'll call the faux balconies that are on the 1983 edition. You can see in Exhibit D, which is the letter that we sent to the property owner. You can see some of those photos of what the trim looked like. I apologize, I don't have any full-sized photos. So you can see, like this balcony, this piece is coming, it's really deteriorated coming off. I think there's a picture of the same balcony. Let's see, do we have a good shot? A lot of these smaller little faux balconies had pieces like this one here that were hanging off. I went out there with one of our inspectors on a windy day, and the pieces were flapping in the wind. So those were deemed a public safety hazard, and our Building Safety Division manager ordered Mr. Yuan to have the trim removed, since it was a threat to public safety. Mr. Yuan complied, and he does not want to replace the trim. He has, as I'm sure you're all quite aware, he has recently held an auction and sold the building, and closing is going to take place, I believe, on the 27th of this month. And so he does not want to do relatively minor work on the building when the new owner will hopefully have much bigger plans for renovating and restoring the building. Let's see. So I do have some full pictures of what this looks like after the trim was removed. This is kind of a far-off shot, but you can see like that big balcony that I showed before has been removed, as well as one above it. There are several more over on the south southern part of the, the western face of the building that were also removed. This is a little closer shot of the northwest facing part. As well, I think there was a balcony over on this north side that was hanging and was removed. Just some more shots of that, and then on the southernmore part. Then on the south-facing part, you can see, I believe some of these balconies had already been removed some years ago, but now the remainder have been removed. So we have that there. I did want to note that there were a couple pieces that were removed from the original building. I think this is the ballroom part of the building. I know in the staff memo it says that all of the pieces are on the 1983 edition, but upon further review of the letter that we sent and talking to our building safety inspector, several of these pieces were asked to be removed, so those were removed as well. Okay. So briefly, I want to run through the criteria that we use to evaluate certificates of appropriateness. At least the relevant criteria as they pertain to this case. The first, and you can follow along on page 2 of the staff memo. The first is to maintain the significant original qualities and character of buildings, structures, sites, or objects, including, if significant, its appurtenances. And it further says that removing or altering any historic or distinctive architectural features should be avoided whenever possible. So the 1983 edition is not historically significant. There was really no discussion that I could find when the property was landmarked of anybody talking about that edition being historically significant. So the pieces that, the trim that was on that part of the building aren't really affected by this criteria. As I mentioned, there were a few pieces that have been removed from the ballroom here, but those were deteriorated and were a public safety hazard, and those had to be removed. Criteria 2 is, for similar reasons that I just gave, we feel that that a certificate of appropriateness would be warranted under this criteria. Is that it says to retain and preserve the historic character of a property, avoid removing or substituting distinctive materials or altering features, spaces, and spatial relationships that characterize a property. Criterion 3 as to retain and preserve changes to a property that have acquired historic significance in their own right. Again, during the landmarking process to designate the building, there was really no discussion or no claims that I could find of anyone saying that the 1983 edition had acquired historic significance in its own right. Criterion 4 is to preserve distinctive materials, features, finishes, and construction techniques or examples of craftsmanship that characterize a property. Again, the 1983 edition doesn't really factor in here. You could make an argument that removing a few of the pieces from the, from this ballroom affects this criterion somewhat. The next criterion is to repair rather than replace deteriorated historic features. Again, the wood that has been removed on the 1983 edition is not considered to be, or are not considered historic features, but these pieces that were on the original building may be considered a historic feature. But I think overall, staff finds that the proposal meets the requirements for a certificate of appropriateness. I think with the pending sale of the property, and without knowing really what the renovation plans are for the new owner, I think to require this wood trim to be replaced at this time is probably not in anybody's best interest. So that concludes my report. Your options in this case are to grant the requested certificate of appropriateness, to grant the certificate of appropriateness with certain conditions, or to deny the request. If you do deny the request, you should provide reasons for denial, and you can recommend ways that the applicant could comply with the criteria. I can answer any questions you have. The property owner is here as well if you have more questions about this. But yeah, I'm happy to take questions.
Any questions? Yes, Trent?
Do you know if the that trim up there on the top of the old part at the ballroom was something that Jumers would have added back in the 80s? Kind of looks to me like it would have been, but I don't know. Do we know what it looked like before the remodeling?
I bet if we looked back at historic photos from Race Street, we might be able to see that, but
Yeah.
I don't have anything at the ready. But that's a good question.
My guess is that it was put up there to make it look like what they built the new addition, and that it's not some original thing. But that's just a guess. I don't really know.
I mean, there was this half timbering look that was, part of it was original to the building on the other side, but I doubt,
Wasn't that kind of built in with stucco?
it was. I think you're right. But this would have been the back of the building, and I think it's going to be hard to find a photograph that illustrates this part very well. But any other questions of Kevin, Kim?
I have a concern, well, for instance, the ballroom here that we're looking at. To me, it appears that the brick is stepping back, and we've lost some of that trim, and I have concerns that there are potential areas where water could be leaking in at this point, and deterioration can be happening. I guess that's probably my big concern when you look at the areas where the half timbering has come off of the 1983 addition. There's exposed sheathing, there's areas where that stucco or drive-it or whatever that material is exposed to the elements, and it's going to continue to deteriorate. And a new owner could possibly buy the building and do something very quick to remedy some of these situations, or it could sit and deteriorate. And then what happens is, you know, then that whole, I don't know what the 1983 addition is like. I hear it's not in very good shape, but that's just hearsay. But my concern is that, you know, it's attached to the original hotel, and I don't know, it just seems like it could open up a lot of problems. But I also can understand why the trim, you know, it's not original and historic, but I worry about deterioration.
But Kevin, the C of A seeks only to approve, in hindsight, that some trim was removed, and it doesn't approve any additional trim being removed.
Correct. It was the trim that was deemed a public safety hazard that has already been removed.
But it's not replacing it. That's my concern,
Oh.
the areas that are
Right.
exposed.
I see.
And I think it also is requesting that we make that removal permanent.
Potentially, yeah.
My understanding is that we can put some certain conditions on there, that it would have to be replaced within a certain amount of time, or I don't know how that plays in then to the sale of it. You know, you don't want to do anything that would harm the sale of the building, but I don't know. I see a potential issue with deterioration.
I had the same question as Trent, actually, and of course, the fact that this is part of the older building does change the criteria, how we would assess those to some degree. So that does, since our charge is to ensure protection of that, it does change a little bit the nature of how we respond to the document. So knowing that history would be very helpful.
We don't know if the new owner has plans. That-
We probably, let's, in keeping with the form of the hearing, questions right now are for Kevin, and then the next thing up is to invite the owner to come up to speak. So does anybody have any additional questions for Kevin right now? Yes.
Are all the pieces off that need to come off?
Yeah, this
this
took
point in
place
time?
several months ago, so yeah.
Okay.
Any other questions of Kevin? If not, Mr. Wan, would you like to come speak?
First, thank you very much for understanding my situation. So I just flew in for this meeting. I think it's in the best interest of the city and me to
Could you move the microphone just a little bit? Is it on?
Hello?
Okay,
Okay.
just get a little closer.
Can you hear me? Thank you very much for understanding my situation and give me the opportunity to say a few words here. First of all, I think it's in the best interest of the city, as well as my interest, to approve of my application, because anyway, the new owner will come to you when after they build this, renovate the hotel. You have opportunity to ask the new owner to do whatever you like. If today you approve, you ask me to do certain things, the owner, whatever you can ask me to do at this moment, I believe is to put a few pieces of wood back. But when the owner comes here, new owner comes here, you can tell him, hey, if you want to renovate, this is our criteria. To put a whole new criteria in front of the new owner, then it will make the building even nicer. That's my understanding.
Does, excuse me, does anybody have any questions of XJ? Trent?
Do you have any knowledge about the the age of that trim we're looking at up there now, the decorative? Whether, I mean, I'm sure you've been up there probably. Do you think it looks like it's 20, 30 years
I
old?
just bought the building. I had no clue when it was put in there.
Okay,
I just do whatever the city asked me to do.
right. All right.
Are there any other questions of XJ? No? Okay, thank you. Oh, one more.
Do you have any photos of that ballroom where the brick goes into the stucco? Do you have any pictures of that up close?
I don't have any pictures.
This is the closest that we can
The
get.
tile is on top of the wall. That wood is, I was on top of this. This wood is for decoration only. All those, that wall is brick. It doesn't, the wood doesn't serve any structural. The whole, you can see the wall, the brick, the white part is the paint. Is all brick. I was 100% sure, because I was on top of it
Right.
numerous times.
Yeah.
So the
So
wood,
is,
So that's all brick, and
Yeah.
it's painted on with
Right.
the wood applied
Yeah,
to
I-
it. There's no step in that.
no, nothing, just, it's all
oh, I
brick.
see, and you can see that there's tile coping on the top of that. I see that, yeah.
It's all brick. It's only for decorative purposes over there, those wood pieces.
So I wonder if they painted this when they did the addition.
because I was very concerned, because just underneath that piece, there is a skylight, glasses, big glasses. I was concerned if that piece of wood falls through that skylight, that would hit people. So I knew very clearly, even if the city had not asked me to remove those pieces, I would have already asked people to remove that piece. It's all brick. It's the original building, that part. So it's all built with bricks.
Are there any other questions for XJ? No?
Well, just a remark that that does seem to be obvious in one of the images in the original set. It's not the one that's now on view, but this one.
Oh, I see, okay.
And that is one photo that shows that.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you.
I can go now, right?
Well, if you could stay until we're,
Yeah, I will stay here.
yes, okay, all right, we know where to find you. Does anyone in the audience wish to speak in favor of the certificate of appropriateness? Does anyone have any questions for the property owner? Does anyone wish to speak against the certificate of appropriateness? Does anyone want to speak? Dennis?
I haven't been able to follow this, the prep for this case especially well. So could I ask a question about what specifically is being discussed for the certificate of appropriateness? Is the certificate of appropriateness specifically for the older Royer building?
No, it's for both more pieces on the addition that have been removed than the older part. So there's only a couple of pieces, a few pieces that have been removed from the older part. But it would appear that those pieces date to the 1983 period for what the addition dates to anyway. So what we're considering is whether to allow the property owner to keep the pieces off that have been removed for conditional reasons.
Yes, the city has required that they be removed for safety.
Right,
And they've already been removed.
right.
So we're not discussing any further removal of decoration from the building,
Correct.
because that's a concern.
We're just discussing
I
whether
had.
the pieces, whether something needs to be put back or whether it can be left as is.
Yes.
And also, I think we could consider, if it's left as is, that there's a time restriction maybe to that. It doesn't have to be a permanent, possibly.
Yeah, I think you could add a condition to that.
That we don't have to say that it's permanently okay to leave those pieces removed.
Okay. And XJ was just explaining to us that this part that has the decoration, which would be like what would it be, like a cornice to a building, maybe, if I could call it that?
Parapet, maybe?
A parapet. Thanks. Is part of the original building structure because it is brick, and so it's not just a wood framing facade. Okay, all right. So I have no problem at all with the previously removed decoration for safety. I think that's fine. I was concerned that more would be removed. I do notice that a lot has been removed on the south-facing wall of the Jumer addition. If you look at it, it is completely lacking decoration.
Yeah.
But because it's not part of the original building, this is not a problem
I
for
think that
the...
was, I think we did a certificate of appropriateness a while back for that, to remove that and to have them paint it, because they painted that. It's a little, the color's off a little bit too.
Yes,
So I
okay.
think that was addressed previously,
That was the
Dennis.
previous issue. Okay, so... And you're speculating that the curved decorations here were perhaps added by Jumer, that it might have originally been white?
It
Or
might have,
it might have been brick.
just
It
brick.
looks like it's
exactly.
brick,
Yeah.
So Jumer, during his time of ownership as a hotelier here, might have painted the top section of the wall and added the decoration so that it would match his new addition.
It appears, yeah.
Okay, all right. That clarification helps me a lot.
Okay.
And so I don't think I have any problem then personally with allowing the certificate of appropriateness, which is kind of a moot point because the decoration's mostly been removed anyways.
Mhm.
So would that require this decoration that's been dated to the Jumer section on the original building be removed as well? Is that an issue at this time?
There's already been some removed. There've been a couple of balconettes that have been removed.
Okay, but there's not going to be any further removal
We're
of
not going to
that.
require that it be removed.
Okay.
No.
And it's probably wise to let the new owner figure out how to address the facade of this building.
Mhm.
Just one follow-up, I mean, in my understanding of this, it's not.
Is your mic on?
I'm sorry? Is
Oh.
it? It should be on,
Okay,
but my
yeah.
voice is very soft. Can you
Yeah.
hear me now? Is
So
that
now
better?
we can really
Okay.
truly hear you.
Yeah.
Thank you, appreciate that.
Thank you, yeah. So the fact that it's been removed, it doesn't have bearing. The question is whether it should be put back. I
Okay,
mean, given that it's been removed.
I gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay,
Mhm.
well, thank you for answering my questions.
Okay, thank you.
and for
Thanks, Dennis.
clarification.
And XJ, did you have any questions for any of the, no, okay.
I don't have questions.
Okay, all right, thank you. Is there anyone in the audience that wishes to speak one way or the other on the issue of the certificate of appropriateness? Okay, commissioners, discussion.
Kevin, can you blow this picture up? Can you enlarge it at all so that we can see if that's really brick
Or David's-
underneath there?
David's picture might have been better.
Yeah, I think even from this, without zooming in,
I
let's
mean,
see,
I think you
I
can
zoom in?
see it across the top.
Yeah,
that
that's
it
what I'm
looks like
looking
it's
at.
painted brick, but-
Can I zoom in on that? You know, maybe. I'm sure I can zoom in on this one, but do I have? Oh, I don't have that picture in there. Let's try this one.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah, that
so
one.
this one here, and let's.
Hello. I think I'm sorry I asked.
Okay,
look at that.
that's a little grainy.
If you
I
bring
think-
it back,
I think you
yeah.
can tell it's brick.
And if you bring it back, yeah, right there above the timber on the right side, you can
Uh-huh.
see what it looks like the paint's peeling off.
Yeah.
And if you look to the left, you can see the reticulation
Yep,
and the paint.
yeah. It makes sense that that this timber would fail too if it was put on in 1983 because it wouldn't be as good a wood as would have been put on in 23.
I wonder if we could do something like, say, not approve the permanent removal of this trim on the ballroom part, and say, well, nothing needs to be done for up to a year, and if they can show that, or give a good, somebody can give a good opinion that it's not original to the building, then they don't have to put it back.
But you're speaking only to this portion
Only
on the...
that, only that
Okay.
part, yeah. The rest of the newer part, I mean, in that, one of those pictures you were flashing through there, looked like there was a gaping hole in the side of the building.
When I
Can
was
you go
just
back some
zooming
of
in.
those?
Yeah, on that
or-
north side, I went by tonight before I came in, and on the north side, as Kim mentioned, there are some areas
Yeah,
where
like
it's
right
just
there. I
open.
mean, is that,
That's just, I think it's just where the trims come off and it's exposed,
and then what, like right there? I don't know. I have a feeling there's lots of problems there, not
I
just
think on
where
the
these.
lower northwest corner, the north side, but on the west side, it looks like it's really open, yeah.
Could we make a statement that we're very concerned about the condition of the addition and encourage stabilization of it? And,
I think we're
I don't
getting
know.
away from the C of A.
okay,
By
I think
doing
that's
that.
probably so.
So I think after we make a decision on the C of A, if you'd like to entertain the idea of a letter or something from the commission, I think would be
Yeah.
okay, but it has to be a
That-
separate.
I mean, You could say, okay, we'll approve it only if you stabilize it, seal it up right now, if that's a condition of offering it. I don't really want to do that, I don't think.
I don't think we can.
Right.
And,
Okay.
again, I forget how the National Register nomination handled it, but really this addition has always been reviewed as something separate and dispensable if necessary.
Would-
Yes.
Well, given that idea, it does seem like our concern needs to be with the original 1920s Joseph Royer situation. And so in the documentation about that, I would somehow expect that there would be an image that would show, or at least a text that would describe what's going on there. Because if one looks at that, the image we were looking at before, you see it at the place where the lower bar of the wood begins. Just below that, there's some articulation in the brickwork, which does suggest that it wasn't undifferentiated all the way up to the top. It's not just applied to a blank wall. That specifically, you can see it there on the right side. These lines that come up, and then the bricks come out, and then it stops. So it does imply that there was a separate way of thinking about what was above. So it could be that something else was there, I don't know. But without knowing that, knowing that would be very, very helpful to any decision. So I like what Trent said about making a condition that respects that. And otherwise, it seems clear that the 1983 edition isn't within the scope of what we're asked to
I think,
protect.
yep. Yes, XJ.
I follow his thinking. Well, I don't know his name, sorry about that.
His name is David.
David Hayes.
Oh,
Sorry,
David.
we don't have a
So-
plate yet.
Is this commission is devoted to protecting the original building's feature built in 1920s or some 80s wood trim or decoration, which is more important, which has more value, historical value for this community? It's up to you to make a decision. For me, this trim is a subjective decision made by that previous hotel owners. So is it worthwhile to protect these things made in the 80s? This is my question. I have no idea.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you. Any other thoughts? I think, based on what everybody's saying, right now, we need to really craft the motion quite carefully, and we also have to have findings of fact, which could include some of the staff comments based on the criteria, to kind of separate our thinking on the 1983 edition versus the the ballroom space.
I just want to throw one more question out there. It talks about, in the certificate of appropriateness, demolition, and if the demolition will not adversely affect those parts of the building or buildings which are significant. So if the 1983 building would continue to deteriorate and they don't do anything to stabilize it, and it had to be removed, would that be an economic hardship for the Lincoln Hotel? I don't even know, how that was attached. I don't remember the construction of that. Would that adversely affect the historic structure? I'm just throwing these questions out there because I'm just concerned that it could be a year from now before they even would start anything, a new owner. That's through planning, that's, drawings, that's going to the city, that's doing all of this stuff, and you go through a winter and a spring and a summer and a fall, and
But I just don't think, and Kevin can correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think we can do apples and oranges on what we're asking for in terms of mothballing or better shoring up the 1983 edition versus the issue of trim on two different parts of the building.
probably problems with the addition in addition to
Right.
this trim being removed. And I can see that we can't force anybody to remedy those problems right now, or,
Is that,
Yeah.
I mean, can the city follow up with inspection on those particular parts that we've highlighted tonight?
I don't see any reason that we couldn't.
There's just some way to know if it's more superficial, even though it looks like a distinctive hole.
Mhm.
You know, how much of a cause for worry that is, and where else, what other places on that 1983 edition this is occurring?
well, I think we need a motion that basically approves what's been done, except for the original building, the trim on the original building that we're looking at right now, and somehow let somebody show us that that's not original, otherwise we want to put back. Not approve the permanent removal of that part, because we don't know if it is old or new. I hate to permanently approve something that may be original to the building, even though it's probably not, but we don't know. So how do we accomplish that? That's my idea, that we don't permanently let that be removed until we know better.
Does the commission, there's someone in the audience that wishes to speak now. Is that all right with the commission?
Sure.
If you want to come forward, you have to sign in and speak in the microphone, please. You have to sign in up here. 2 sign-ins.
I guess I just wanted to say that
Could you state your name and? Yeah.
my name is Heather Grossman.
Thank you.
Thank you. I agree wholeheartedly about this discussion about the 1983 portion versus the 1920s portion. The one comment I wanted to make is about the 1920s portion, which it does seem totally reasonable to say that within a year you would have to replace this if it's found to be original to the building, and certainly some research would need to be done onto the facade and what it looked like. The one thing I would note, though, is that if it's found not to be original, it then does open the new owner to take off all of that facade, and you would want to. That's what I was going to say, is what is the process by which you would decide doing that? Because if it's found to all been from the 1983 renovation, then they could argue that it's not historically significant, and in fact removing it is part of that. And so if you leave it open, you leave it open both to replacement, but then also to removal of all of it. So.
In response to that, among the criteria that we're asked to consider, one is retain and preserve changes to a property that have acquired historic significance in their own right. And that seems to pertain here in the sense that in the section underneath that, in the document it says, during the meetings in 2010 to discuss the landmark application at the Historic Preservation Commission and City Council, no one claimed that the 1983 edition was historically significant. And so it is differentiated from the Joseph Royer building, but it seems like if it's subsequently
Added to the
contributes
Royer
to the
building?
character of the building, if it's how it's understood, or if that would, it's open to discussion at some point whether or not the 1983 editions meet that criterion.
Or a 1983 addition to the 1920s building.
Yeah,
Which is
yeah,
actually
yeah.
more to the point.
Mhm.
Right.
My
But it,
oth-
yeah.
Oh, no, David, go ahead. My only other question was, it doesn't look like any of the removed material from the 1983 edition was structural in any way.
Right.
It's all decorative.
Yeah.
So it has no bearing in some ways on the rest of it.
Yeah,
Thanks.
thank you.
Thanks.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, and then we have the 50-year rule for the National Register that would say that unless this trim is of exceptional significance, which I dare you to argue that,
It's very specific.
then likely, it's still got some aging to do, some serious aging before it would be something that we would miss, should it be removed.
So I agree with what Trent was suggesting, and it just hangs on the question of if it's compromising the 1920s building in some way. I think the points about the well-being of the building, like is this exposing it in some way, understanding that situation specifically it'd be easy to figure out. And if any portion of that is original, then that has to be respected. So it does seem like that's still a condition, but for the other aspects of it, the parts, I have absolutely no problem, like with the balconies that have been removed from the 1983 edition, seems like it's beyond the scope of
Yeah.
concern.
So maybe we need to have a group effort on forming a motion, because we need to have, yes.
Can I ask one question? Does the property maintenance code cover any of, if they find, 6 months from now, it looks like, the plasters or the stuccos falling off? I mean, will the city follow through on that? How does that work?
Follow through in what way?
Well, follow through with the new owner and, have concerns about additional deterioration and...
If something looks like it's a public safety hazard, then we'll follow up on it. I'm not sure if that's your question.
I-
That's about the extent of my knowledge of the building safety code.
Probably not for building. Yeah, that's true.
Mhm.
Any other questions? Anybody want to start to take a stab at a motion?
Yeah, I'm going to start here somewhere.
Okay. You've got it. Yeah.
Well, I move that we allow the approve the certificate of appropriateness as it was originally made, with the separate provision that the trim is on and was on the 1920 original building not be approved for permanent removal. We allow it now, but
Would you,
Pending.
that we allow
a year. I think
allow
is-
1 year? I liked
Yeah.
what Heather said.
Yeah.
Allow 1 year to determine whether the trim is original or historic, and if so, it needs to be replaced within that year.
Yeah. So if we can make that smoothly look like a motion.
Should we also do findings of fact, something to the effect that we agree that the 1983 edition is not historic at this time or not significant at this time?
I think for the part that you're approving, which would be for the, without a doubt, 1983 edition, if you're approving it, I don't think you need any findings
Okay.
of fact. It's just if you deny or if you add conditions, I think you probably want to add some findings.
Okay. So are we sort of okay where that stands now?
Read it back to us,
I-
Kevin.
He's wincing.
I
Read
got
that back,
I got
please,
about
Kevin.
half. I got about half of it. So the motion would be to approve the certificate of appropriateness, except that the trim that was on the 1920s original building. Let's see. Well,
Must be replaced.
That application doesn't speak to the original building
No,
Right, at all.
at all.
but I think we should not just ignore it.
I'm just,
yeah, I think
That was
the
more of an oversight than anything.
Yeah, the intent was to have the request cover all the trim that has been removed. The way we advertised it doesn't specify what year the trim was put on or anything. It's just for the permanent removal of wood trim, so I think we're okay.
So then would we be requesting that the trim on the original portion of the building, if found to be historic, be replaced in within 1 year's time? Is that what we're saying?
We could require it to be unless it's shown not to be old.
Yeah.
I think that would,
Yeah, so I think I would suggest that if it's found that it is original to the building, then you have, then it must be replaced or whatever you choose. If it's found to have been a later addition, then I haven't heard any discussion about whether it would still be historically significant, whether it has acquired its significance, other than Alice saying it probably wouldn't meet the National Register standards. But I think you may hash out whether, say it's not original, has it acquired historic significance? And if the answer to that is no, then I think the condition would say if it's original, it's got to be replaced. If it's not original, it can stay off.
that's the way I feel about it. If
Can-
it's a- if it-
I'm sorry, Trent, go ahead.
I'm done.
I was just going to say, can we leave the 1923 portion of the certificate of appropriateness open so that we basically separate it into non-significant and significant and leave that part of it open so that it stays on as old business and we revisit it?
I don't know that we can parse it out for the same reason that I shot down Kim's suggestion. Because the way it's advertised is just for the removal of the trim. That has been removed. We've required that it was removed because of public safety concerns. So I think it's a one shot, cover it all.
So point of clarification, is that in part because the only discussion of 1983 comes in your memorandum to us when you're giving us sort of the background? But looking at the rest of the application or what the owner was asked to do, I don't see that distinction. So is that why we're able to say, yeah, this doesn't need to be rewritten because it's only in the interpretive? Does that make sense?
Maybe. So this came about, obviously, because we asked the owner to remove trim that was a public safety hazard. And the request is to just allow all that trim that was a public safety hazard to be removed permanently.
Right. Yeah.
So there is no distinction.
So when I look at exhibits A, B, and C, I don't see any reference to a distinction. But when I look at the memorandum, I do see, us being counseled that this is on the 1983 part. So we've learned
Yeah.
that it's more complex than that, but that doesn't have bearing, I
Just
guess.
We've just learned that tonight.
Correct.
Well,
And
not
I,
you, but-
yeah,
Yeah.
I apologize for that. I did not realize until earlier today that
I'm glad we
in,
know
I
it
think
at
in
all.
Exhibit
Yeah.
D,
Yeah.
there was a picture of some of the trim that was on the original building.
Okay.
So if we can't split it, can we continue this hearing to a future date? Can we leave it open and not make a decision at this point?
That's certainly a possibility. I'd hesitate to go that route.
It's kind of
What-
leaving
what day is
something
today?
open.
Today is
It's
the
a weird
3rd.
little clause at the closing.
Unless, if we'd be subject to, with the closing date being on the 27th, I would like to see some resolution before then, because I think it would be in everybody's best interest.
So we really can't even do this year, within a year, it either needs to be put back or determine that it's not historic.
Well, if you went with that condition, at least it would give some certainty.
Okay.
But I think another option would be, let's see, could we even, no, I don't know if we could notice for a special meeting within that time. Well, we could call a special meeting, if we continue it, we could call a special meeting in, say, 3 weeks. That would give us enough time, I think, to, or I guess we wouldn't have to renotice, because it would just be a continuation, right?
So are you saying you don't think we can put a, say everything else is okay, but we put a 1-year approval on this?
I think that's fine.
I think we should just do that. We're not really splitting it. We're just making a distinction. I don't think we're I don't think we're overcomplicating this, and that's going to be a problem. That's what I think.
So if there's a certificate of appropriateness that's issued to the current owner,
Mhm.
does that constrain the future owner? Or does that tie them to this certificate of
Should
appropriateness?
tie the property.
It's bound to the property.
Okay.
I think that doing it this way actually clarifies, because it does articulate the difference between the
Mhm.
portions of the building. So
Mhm.
it helps one understand the issue at stake better. So I like the idea of
Mhm.
putting in the 1-year.
So do we have something that includes the 1 year clear enough, or do we need to?
Yeah,
You were reading it, and then you said accept, and when and that was
well,
10 minutes
because
ago.
yeah.
And I
this-
thought, okay,
this
we're
whole
almost
thing-
there.
Yeah, I kind of trailed off on my notes, because I
Yeah.
had
Well,
trouble following.
start over again on that.
Following. Well, I can't,
Please.
I don't think I can can I state the motion
Well,
as
it
I
can-
would? Well, okay, what I have written
'Cause
here,
you know what we
what I
want.
have written verbatim says,
we can do
approve
it
the
again.
certificate of appropriateness with the provision that trim that was on the 1920s original building not be allowed to be removed permanently, ...
Not be allowed to be removed permanently until, within a period of 1 year, there's a determination made as to the trim on the old ballroom section.
Something like that, but I think we could state it cleaner.
Probably. I don't doubt that. All right.
Okay, not, let's see.
All right. So,
Yeah, not be
Except-
allowed to be removed permanently unless it is determined to not be original to the building
Or
within
or-
1 year.
Or if it is determined, I mean, instead of the unless not,
Mhm.
then just say not to be removed permanently if it is determined within 1 year's
Yeah.
time
There
to
you go.
have been
Mhm.
original
I
to
don't-
the building.
I don't want to leave it to
Mhm.
us or how, I want somebody to bring to us evidence that it's new.
I think this building was documented as part of the National Register nomination for
Right.
Lincoln Square, because these properties are inseparable now with the Jumer stuff. And it's an incredibly well-documented National Register nomination, so I'm guessing Karen Coomer covered this as part of that nomination. If she didn't, I'd be surprised, and if she didn't, I wouldn't know where else to go for a verification. But it might even be,
You can
what
just-
about the township cards over on Green Street? Sometimes aren't there building permits pulled, or sometimes those are documented?
In my mind, I think it's easier than that, because I feel like I've seen a picture of this building from Ray Street from
Oh.
the 50s.
Mhm.
So,
Okay.
And my guess is you could just get up there and look at the wood and say, this was
The same.
just tacked on there. But-
So there were multiple paths, but although
Yeah.
it might have been replacing something from the 20s.
Mhm.
So.
So can we as a commission try to find evidence one way or the other and then determine, what our next step is? I mean, I'll go to the archives and look for photos. I don't care.
right, so I think
Mhm.
with the way this is drafted, I feel like a prudent course of action would be to to go this route, and then before the closing date, we find evidence one way or the other so that there's certainty for the new owner. Let's not wait until until the 30th to find that evidence.
Can this be an ongoing item under old business then, so that it's always on our minds,
Well,
on the
Kevin,
agenda?
But we want to determine this within the next few weeks.
right.
Oh, all right.
So, closing on the 27th. So we'll, I'll get on this tomorrow.
So before that,
Yeah.
and we'd have to have a special meeting before that?
I don't know that a special meeting. That's a good question. So if we were to find evidence between now and the 27th, I guess a special meeting might be needed to make an official determination. But I don't know. This is uncharted territory.
Okay, sorry.
Couldn't the terms be met? I mean, if there's a condition within the motion,
Mhm.
then it sets it up so that the answer could come tomorrow, even. You
Right.
could find
That's-
it in the
well,
in the
that's what I-
archive.
yeah.
And then there would be nothing more for us to do, I think.
That's what
I
I'm
mean,
kind
it
of.
seems like we could make a decision
hoping.
with that conditional,
Mhm.
and then it's up to
maybe-
whoever's going to do
Maybe
that.
we've said all this before, but what if we had the motion read that we approve the certificate of appropriateness to allow the work described herein, except that the trim on the original building must be replaced within 1 year unless it can be shown not to be original.
Oh. That works.
And then it seems like we've got a year for somebody, the new owner, somebody to decide, us looking at pictures or something. And then if nobody can show that, then they have to replace it. It's already done, but maybe that's too simple or complicated.
Well, I don't think I think that's essentially the same thing we've been discussing.
It is, but I just put it in a sentence.
Yeah, and I would suggest that we all, since I think it is in the best interest of the city to make the sale of the property happen as smoothly as possible. I think it behooves us to go out there and find some evidence in the next few weeks.
One difference in terms of what Trent suggested is that if one is not able to find the answer, what happens? Because it, right, and so in one case you put the trim, in the other case you say you don't have to put the trim. So in a sense, I mean, I like that because it errs on the side of the possibility. If there's no evidence, then that's respected.
Yeah, I think it's good. It's more of a proactive condition, because the other one I feel like is more, yeah.
And it doesn't seem like an undue burden because given the documentation that almost certainly exists about this in the landmark, in the research for that, and photo evidence and other things, it seems like it will be easy to figure it out.
Mhm. Trent, do you want to reread your motion, if that's the motion?
Go for it.
I move that the Historic Preservation Commission approve a certificate of appropriateness to allow the work described herein, except that the trim on the original building must be replaced within 1 year unless it can be shown not to be original. I don't have it backward, do I, with too many knots in there?
No,
Unless,
no,
I think that makes sense.
I think. Any additional questions or comments on the motion? Ready for roll call vote, Kevin.
I'll
We need a
second
s-
the motion.
Yes.
Oh, duh. Yes. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Now we're ready for roll call vote.
All right, let me take my other seat.
I say approve or disapprove, or yea or nay?
We'll take anything. Yeah.
Okay. Just turn that off. Okay, so the motion was moved by,
Oh, they have pictures of it.
Oh.
There's a picture here that indicates that the trim was not original
You go, Ilona.
She just left to look this up.
Can you show it to us? We can change our motion.
Yeah, can we pass it around?
May approach the bench. Well, it's here.
It's that thing.
Oh, yeah.
It's tough to see in there.
Mm-hmm.
There's almost like there's a little, it's not quite as dark up there. I'm not sure from that, Ilana. What do you, is that the same picture?
If that's the portion, then there's some differentiation, you can tell there's something going on.
Super
But
hard to tell.
I can't tell what that is.
Wow,
I can't tell
cool
the
building.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Too
but
bad it's gone.
There's something there. It's not that there's nothing. It's that there's something there. So it doesn't answer the question for me. Oh, here's another. It's almost the same angle.
I think so. I don't know. What's this one? Makes me dizzy looking at it. Oh, that's, can't tell.
This doesn't actually show that side.
No.
It does show the,
Let's leave it like it is. Motion.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Do we have consensus? Yeah.
Yeah, I'm agreed to leave it go as it is
All right.
for now.
So we
Okay.
need that roll call.
moved by Shepherd, seconded by Bagliuzzo. Okay, Commissioner Hayes,
yes.
Commissioner Novak,
Yes.
Commissioner Smith,
Yes.
I guess I should call Commissioner Shepherd,
Yes.
and Commissioner Pagliuzzo.
Yes.
Okay, that motion passes.
Okay. I hereby close the public hearing, HP-2018-COA-06. Thank you. We have no new business. Next is monitoring of historic properties. Kevin, we have something on the IMC sign.
Yeah, I was hoping to have some more. But so several months ago, I reached out to the IMC because I had heard that they were planning to replace the 3 letters on the IMC building, that sign. And I knew that any review or any external changes to the building had to be reviewed by IHPA. So I put IMC in contact with Darius at IHPA, and that was the last I had heard of it until a few weeks back. I was contacted, me and Alice were contacted by a board member of IMC, and said that they wanted to discuss the replacement of the sign with the Historic Preservation Commission. Unfortunately, I haven't been able to connect with that board member. So again, I was hoping to have more, but I think maybe maybe next meeting we will have some more. But I'll keep you posted.
Okay.
I have a connection with a board member there too, so I can do a little background investigating.
Which board member?
Paul,
Okay.
youth?
Okay, this isn't the one that contacted
Mhm.
us. Well, let me reach out once or twice more,
Okay.
and if I need some help, I'll let you know.
Great, thanks.
Okay, thank you. Next is staff report, Downtown Historic District update.
Well, Alice, I was hoping you could give us a little bit of update since your students are helping out.
Two of them in the audience, too. Two of the helpers.
Excellent.
I decided that as part of my fall class that we would take on finishing the National Register nomination. It's been kind of interesting to try to define, I'm 2 weeks late and give you the assignment, how to define tasks so that it's something that's gradable, but so that we're also getting all the parts that we need for the nomination. But I think I finally have it figured out. So, I just want to be sure that if we go to work on this, that it will happen. Because otherwise I don't see the district happening. So that's where things stand. So hopefully we'll have all the parts to put a draft together in December.
Excellent.
What happened to that? The 5,000, does that tie in? Does that-
Well, it could tie in. We have been short-staffed on planning. We do have a new planner that should be starting in the next couple of weeks. I don't know if I can make the official announcement yet, but once some of the pressure is relieved from current staff, i.e. me, and others, but at least for this, I'll have more time where I can actually take on some of these things. So, putting out a request for qualifications if we need to. I think I'll probably have to chat with Alice about how we want to tackle that.
But what your students are doing isn't going to be overlapping,
It should
duplicating something that
it
the
should-
consultant
Yeah,
might do.
if it could replace it completely,
Yeah.
fine. We'll
That's
just
what I'm
have to
aiming for.
brainstorm to
I just don't
use
think we're
that
going
money
to
for
find a
something else.
consultant to take it on for that kind of a price. So I'm opting for the free labor. Sorry, guys.
Yeah, well, and then we'd have to define the consultant's role, which
Yeah.
might be.
And there's a lot of
Difficult.
information that's already been pulled together, so it's kind of getting it in the right order and consistency between the different parts, more than anything. So I think that's where things stand. Any questions? You're obsessing over the hotel. Did you have a question?
No, I just
No.
wanted to say thanks for helping.
Okay, study session, we don't have anything. Any announcements? Any preservation announcements? No? Okay, motion to adjourn?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
We're adjourned, thank you.
Okay, thanks.